In 2014, in Tucson with under $300 total, I turned a dead step van behind a closed tire shop into a home with light, a cool interior, water I could drink, and a place to cook a hot meal. For almost 2 years, the people walking past that gravel lot had no idea anyone lived inside that rusted box, much less that I was sleeping better in there than I had in the last apartment I ever rented. The first night, I stretched out on a salvaged twin mattress with a battery-powered fan humming over my chest, listening to the steel walls tick as the desert cooled. And for the first time in a long time, I was not afraid of what tomorrow was going to cost me. That is the part nobody tells you. A working home does not actually cost what the market says it costs. It costs what materials and watt hours and gallons and square feet really cost, and the gap between those two numbers is where I learned to live. What I am about to tell you is not luck, and it is not a story about a saint who got handed a miracle. It is a system, a sequence. People living the way I lived have been refining this quietly for decades, passing it hand to hand in parking lots and storage yards and gas station bathrooms, and the level of engineering inside it would embarrass a contractor charging you $40,000 to finish a garage. By the time I am done, you are going to understand why a $30 part is the only reason my lights came on every night, and you are going to understand the mistake I made in my first winter that almost killed me before I figured any of this out. Stay with me, because the same engineering that kept that step van livable on nothing is exactly what would keep your own house running the week the grid finally fails, or the month the rent finally outruns the paycheck. Let me start with the space itself, because every person I have ever met who tried to copy this got the space wrong first. They look for something cute, something with windows, something that already feels like a little cabin. That is the trap. What you want is something nobody wants, in a place nobody is watching, with a shell that already keeps weather out. My step van was sitting on 4 flat tires behind a tire shop that had gone out of business 2 years earlier. The owner of the lot lived in another state. I tracked him down through the county assessor's website, called him from a library phone, and offered him $40 a month to let me park there and watch the place so nobody stripped the building. He said yes inside of 3 minutes, because the alternative was paying somebody to haul the van to a scrapyard. The van itself he gave me for nothing. $40 a month for a roof, 4 walls, a 1/4-inch steel, a sliding side door, and an address of sorts. In Tucson, a studio apartment in 2014 ran $850 a month if you could find a landlord who would take you without 2 months deposit and a credit pull. I did the math on a napkin at a Circle K, and I never looked back. But a steel box in the Sonoran desert is an oven, and that is the first thing that nearly broke me. Bare metal in July, parked on gravel, will hit 140 degrees inside by 2 in the afternoon. You do not sleep in that. You do not survive that without doing something deliberate, and the something deliberate is not an air conditioner. An air conditioner needs more electricity than I could ever generate, and electricity costs are what put me out of an apartment in the first place. So I went the other direction. I went toward the envelope. I tore apart construction site dumpsters for 3 weeks and pulled out scrap rigid foam insulation the pink and blue panels contractors trim off and throw away by the truckload. Each sheet has an R value around 5 per inch, which is engineering language for how hard heat has to work to get through it. I layered 2 inches on every wall, 3 inches on the ceiling, and 1 inch on the floor under a piece of salvaged plywood. Total cost of insulation, $0. Total cost of the construction adhesive to hold it on, $11 at a hardware store closeout. After that, the interior of that van in July, with no cooling at all, sat about 30 degrees below the outside temperature just from the insulation and a piece of reflective windshield shade I cut to fit the inside of the back doors. That is not magic. That is physics nobody teaches you, because nobody profits from teaching you. Then I had to think about water, and water in the desert is the part where the system either works or it does not. There is no rainwater catchment in Tucson worth talking about for most of the year. Tucson gets about 12 inches of rain a year, and most of it falls in 2 months. So I learned to do 2 things. The first was to catch every single drop of the monsoon. I rigged a slope tarp off the top of the van that funneled rain into a 5-gallon food-grade bucket I pulled out of a bakery dumpster, the kind that used to hold frosting. 1 inch of rain across the roof of that van filled the bucket and a half in under an hour. The second thing I did was learn the city. Every public park in Tucson has a spigot. Every cemetery has a spigot. Every dog park has a spigot. I carried 2 collapsible 5-gallon jugs in a backpack, and I made a route, and I never paid for a gallon of water in 2 years. For drinking, I filtered everything through a gravity filter I bought used from a hiking forum for $19, the kind backpackers use for backcountry trips. Real filter, documented log 6 bacterial removal, the same technology aid workers use overseas. I drank that water for 2 years and never got sick once. Now stay with me here, because this is the part of the video that matters to you even if you have never spent a night without a roof in your life. If the grid in your city went dead tomorrow morning and stayed dead for a week, the people around you would panic inside of 3 days. Not because food runs out, because water stops moving and the toilet stops working and the phone goes dark. The exact system I just described to you, a slope catchment off any roof you already own, a $20 gravity filter, 2 collapsible jugs, and a route to the nearest municipal spigot will keep a family of 4 in clean drinking water indefinitely for under $60 in parts. The cooling envelope works the same way. 2 inches of scrap rigid foam taped to the inside of a garage window in August will drop the room 10 degrees without a single watt of electricity. I would set this up before I set up anything else. Before the generator, before the freeze-dried food, before any of it, because water and temperature are what kill people first when the lights go out. The reason nobody tells you, this is the same reason nobody told me until I was already in the van. There is no industry that profits from a $60 solution. There is an enormous industry that profits from the $4,000 one. Which brings me to the part I promised you in the beginning, the $30 part. The one piece of equipment that is the actual reason I had light every night, a charged phone every morning, and a fan running over my face when the desert would not cool down past 90 until well after midnight. People assume it was a solar panel. The solar panel mattered, sure. I had a 100-watt panel I bought, used off a roofer for $35 after he upgraded his rig. But the panel is not the heart. The heart is a used deep cycle marine battery I bought at a swap meet for $28 from a man who thought it was dead. It was not dead. It was sulfated, which is what happens when a lead acid battery sits discharged for too long. And there's a process called desulfation where you trickle a low controlled current through it and the crystals on the plates break down and the battery comes back. I read about it on an off-grid forum at a public library. I ran a slow charge through that battery for 4 days off the solar panel with a $5 charge controller, and it came back to about 80% of its original capacity, which was enough to give me roughly 600 watt hours of usable storage every single day. 600 watt hours runs an LED light strip for 30 hours, charges a phone 12 times, and powers a small 12-volt fan all night. That $28 battery, which any auto parts store would have crushed for the lead core, ran my home for 19 months before it finally gave out. And when it did, I bought another one the same way for $31. The total electrical system in that van, panel, controller, battery, wiring, fuses, LED strip, fan, and a cigarette lighter style USB port cost me under $80, and it never failed me once. That is the secret. Not a banned device, not a miracle, a battery the world threw away, brought back with sunlight and patience, the way people did it on homesteads 100 years ago before any of us were told we needed a utility bill to be alive. I made the mistake I told you about in my first winter, and I am only here telling you this because I got lucky. Tucson gets cold at night in January, into the 30s, and I sealed the van up tight because I wanted to trap every degree of warmth my body was making. I bought a small propane heater at a thrift store for $6, and I ran it for 20 minutes before bed to take the edge off. I did not vent it. I woke up at 3 in the morning with a headache that felt like an ice pick behind my eyes and just barely enough sense left to crawl to the side door and roll it open. Carbon monoxide is silent, and it does not care how clever you think you are. I never ran an open flame anything in that van again. From then on, heating was thermomass and body heat and a wool blanket I found at a thrift store for $2, and that was enough because the insulation I had already put up was doing the heavy lifting. That mistake teaches you fast, and it teaches you once. I tell you about it because the lesson is the whole point. The cost of getting this wrong is not financial. The cost of getting this right is almost nothing. If you are the kind of person who has always suspected that the price of a normal life has very little to do with what a normal life actually costs to build, then you already understand why I am telling you all of this. The market did not invent shelter, people did. People with nothing did, over and over. For as long as there have been people and the knowledge is still here, scattered in dumpsters and swap meets and forum posts and the heads of people the rest of the country drives past without seeing, I am one of those people. I built a home that worked for the price of a single month of someone else's rent, and I slept in it through 2 summers and 2 winters, and the only reason it ended is because I chose to end it. That is a kind of freedom most people will never feel, and it costs less than a used phone to begin learning. Of everything I built, the cooling envelope, the catchment, the desulfated battery, the gravity filter, which one would you set up first if I gave you a weekend and $100? Tell me in the comments, because I read them and the answers tell me what to film next. Subscribe if you are done believing that a roof and a light and a cold glass of water have to cost what they tell you they cost, because the next video is the full sourcing route. Every dumpster, every forum, every swap meet, and every county website. I used to find the materials and the space itself for almost nothing. And once you see that route laid out end to end, you are not going to be able to unsee it.